You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Eliza Jane Brazier on the show with me today. She has an amazing new book. It's called If I Disappear, and it's out available everywhere now. And this is a really unique book that I love the premise of, and I'm excited to talk about it today. Welcome to the show, Eliza.
Thank you so much for having me, Hank.
Eliza, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I used to obviously I started as a reader, I think as most of us do. So I would read, voraciously, one book after the other. So I think that I started first of all, just telling stories to entertain myself. But I think that probably my first experience of let's say trying to get published happened when I was about 12 years old, probably, I say roughly. I wrote this story down, and it was this really dark, crazy story, basically about some guy who was cast out from society and bullied to death, super dark. But I thought this was great. I'd made casting decisions. I was ready for this to take off, and that would be my career. So I went onto the internet and I found an address in Hollywood. And this was in the early days of the internet, right? So I just went with any address I could find, figuring that Hollywood is just one place,
Right.
where they're waiting for my story. And
Hollywood's Oz.
yeah, exactly. And I mailed it to this address. And I guess the people were kind enough that a month later, I actually did get it back. But yeah, that was my first foray. And of course, after that, I was just so disheartened that I quit for 20 years.
Did you get it back all marked up?
No, man, I don't, honestly, I don't remember that well. I know I got it back. I don't think there was a comment, which maybe isn't surprising considering the content. And I did include some pretty violent illustrations.
That helped.
Oh my gosh. And I remember whenever I mailed it, I said to my best friend, I was oh, my life's going to change. I can't tell you how, but my life's about to change. Just so you know, be ready,
Well, at least you didn't get the manuscript back along with a visit from a social worker.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. My parents got out of that unscathed. Luckily. That was the inner life. I don't even know where those, I probably had read, I'd read Stephen King when I was that age. So it's probably from that I was because there's stuff that I had no experience of or relation to, except I guess through, novels.
That's so funny. So I assume that you were a bookish kid that you read all the time?
Yeah, for sure. We would go to the library when I was younger, probably a couple of times a week. And I would just get, I'm the kind of person, and I still to this day, if I go to Barnes and Nobles, I'm going to come out with however many books I can carry.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you get to that, you just start grab. And then you have so many that it's it's starting to lean to one side or the other. You're okay, I got to get out of here quick before I have a cart,
That's so funny. That's so funny. You mentioned Stephen King was a big influence on you when you were younger. What were some of the other authors or books or series that kind of shaped your love of story, or that maybe shaped the types of stories that you connect with?
I think that there was the books that I read when I was younger. The thing is when I was younger, there weren't the same sort of books available as there are now. For example, there weren't as many books by female authors where there was a female protagonist. So for that, I would say when I was really young, I was reading Stephen King. I would read books about horses and dogs. I'd read Jack London and
Right.
The Saddle Club and Gossip Girl. But I think that what really got me, influenced me the most as a writer would be stuff that I have read more recently, because that's when it the field started to open up a lot more to where like a woman could write about things that interested me. You know what I mean? So like, for example, I think like Gillian Flynn was somebody who really like opened up like the field as in like, okay, this is popular. You know, a woman can write about these kind of like scary topics, can write about these like unreliable or like unlikable people. Yeah, so that's probably like what mostly influenced me as a writer, but it wasn't really available when I was younger. Like there was obviously like there's the odd book that you would kind of read that would be written by a woman and about a woman and would have a character that was kind of messy. But a lot of times, even like the really great female authors like Patricia Highsmith or Donna Tartt, you know, they were featuring male protagonists. So it's kind of interesting how that's changed and very awesome. Like I'm glad for that.
So Eliza, you had this moment of possibility when you were young. You wrote this manuscript, you sent it off, you got it back, and were sort of I don't want to use the word devastated, but you put that dream on hold for a few years.
Yeah,
what was it that brought it back around to you?
You know, and I wonder if you'll be able to relate to this as well. But I do think that, you know, let's say 10, 20 years ago, it really wasn't as accessible of a dream. Like,
sure,
I didn't know how to get published. I didn't know, like, I think a lot of people don't, you know, who do you send it to? Like, how does it happen? Like, do I send it, you know, what do I have to write to get there? Or who do I approach with it? How do I approach them? Like, what's the way to do it? That information like wasn't really like available. I mean, like in the old days, it was like you mail a query, you know? So I think that in that way, it was a really closed industry. And then because of really, I think like the rise of like Twitter, where that became like an author spot, and then blogs, which would be like kind of linked through there, like writing blogs, it became like there was a path, like there was a clear defined path. It was like, you need to write a query. It needs to like kind of look like this. And you need to send it, you know, to sort of like people that represent your work and all this kind of stuff. So because of that, that's really what changed for me, because I think before that, it was such an inaccessible thing. Like, I mean, look what I did when I was 12. Like, I literally sent a book to a random address because I had no idea how to do it. And then I saw, you know, people around me do it. And I realized, like, okay, if I research and I learn everything about this industry and about how to sell a book, then actually this might be really possible, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So what, this is your first novel, is it not?
Well, it's my first adult novel. I actually was published in young adult, like probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that first book that was published?
Well, so that was under my under my late husband's name. So it was Eliza Wass, and it was like this book called The Cresswell Plot. But like right after I published it, my husband, or not after I published it, I should say, after I got the offer for the book, my husband died. So that was like a really like sort of traumatic, obviously, time like in my life. Like, so I kind of obviously the book went out, still like promoted it and everything, but it was just like a super dark time. And I really like had a trouble reconnecting to writing after that happened. Cause like, I'm sure like you probably feel this way too, but like when you're writing, like you tap into like your like psyche and like your emotions, and you're having, you know, to do all this kind of stuff. It can be very like therapeutic. But when you've just been through like some like big trauma, I really wasn't enjoying it. Like I found it really like painful. So I definitely like took a step back, like kind of thought like I parted ways with my agent. I kind of thought like, I'm not really going to do this anymore. I'm going to do something else because this isn't making me happy. And then I kind of came back to it because I'm, you know, at the end of the day, I am like a storyteller. I am who I am. Like I'm addicted to it. I love it. So once I had time, I think, to like put some distance between that, you know, then I was able to get back into it and eventually get to the point where I enjoyed it again, you know?
Right. So is there a delineation? Do you see the previous YA work that you did as different from your new book, If I Disappear? And, you know, going through the personal trauma that you did you feel like this book or this type of book was a necessity for you? Like, did you feel like you had changed as a storyteller?
You know, honestly, I think I more found where I fit in better. When I wrote my young adult novel is like really, it's very mature. for a young adult novel. Like it like features like incest, like murder, all this kind of stuff. Like, I don't know.
So lighthearted weekend.
Yeah, like it was a pretty like dark kind of book. And I always kind of felt a little bit weird, even like in a way promoting it, because they're kind of like, oh, gee, your kid might enjoy this. You know what I mean? So I feel like I more found like a better place that I fit in. And also I found some really amazing people that like I enjoy working with. And so that has been like a big change. So it feels very different. I mean, again, like just because literally like I got my contract and my husband died like right after, I think it kind of tainted that whole experience, because you can't help but conflate the two in your mind. And you almost feel like it's some kind of like karmic retribution. Like the thing is, when someone dies, like your brain goes crazy. So I think that I felt like almost bad that I had a book deal. You know what I mean?
I do. And one of those things where you have to like completely shift gears to get out of that mindset of, I've got to, I still want to do this thing, but I've got to do it differently.
Yeah. I had to like change the name. Time is like a huge thing. And I just kind of just tried to like separate it in my head so that I wouldn't continue to feel that I was doing something wrong by writing in a way. It's just so bizarre, but it does happen, man.
Well, writing under a different name, or at least a different last name, and in a new genre, a new reading audience, did this feel like publishing again for the first time?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I will say as well, like you gotta like, I guess, this book, my first book, I kind of, got my deal and then my husband died. Then this one, I got my deal and then we got a pandemic. So but like,
we're going to need you to stop writing for a while.
But this time I was like more ready for it, because I like knew, honestly, like the hard thing is too, like when you first get published, you put like a lot of pressure on yourself to do well. And my book did not do like, it didn't like meet expectations, and so I felt like it really hit me kind of hard, like it really like sort of hurt, especially after I'd already been through so much. I was like, dude, come on, like I need something here. It was just like another like, but so this time, because of that, like I am so like zen about it. Like I'm just like, I just enjoy like it's so much more. And I'm like, just have fun with it. Like, don't put all this pressure that it has to do well. Enjoy it while you have it. Enjoy the people around you is the big thing. Like get a good support system, collaborators, and like don't be like, oh, I have to kind of like win or nothing,
Right. So the plot of If I Disappear revolves around a true crime podcast and a woman who is a fan of this particular true crime podcast and the genre as a whole. When did you discover true crime podcast and what is it? I love them. But what was it about them, or this whole kind of new trend that got your attention?
Okay, so for me, like again, I feel like we're going back to, I don't want to like belabor a point, but for me, I kind of came about it in a different way because it did kind of correspond again with like when my husband died. His death was actually like an unlawful killing. And it was like a super traumatic kind of experience, and to have to go through like the coroner courts and all this kind of stuff. And I sort of found myself really drawn to like first Dateline episodes. And I think it's because like there's really no place when you go through like trauma or, kind of like anything sort of dark, there's really no space to like talk about it because people don't really want to hear about it. It's depressing. So I really like first started kind of, I think, just listening and watching Dateline episodes because it made me feel like less alone. Like I wasn't the only one going through that kind of stuff. And Dateline episodes have like kind of a resolution, where usually something is kind of solved. And then from there, I discovered True Crime Podcast. And that was like, took it to another level because, I think in the last like 5 to 10 years, there have been these women who have kind of created this like amazing community and space around them. And like, that would be like, especially my favorite murder, like Karen and Georgia, like they're so funny. They're so smart. They talk about mental health. They are very open and honest about like themselves. And they create this really safe space and community where like, we can all kind of like come together and sort of like talk about what scares us a little bit and kind of feel like we're maybe getting like control over it. And then I like from there, I went to like live events and I actually met people in the community. And I was so surprised in a way by how open and friendly everyone was, like how joyful the atmosphere was. And that's like a big part of it. And I think that really comes down to those specific hosts who created that environment, you know? But yeah, that was definitely like the draw for me. And like why, I guess in a way, like I wanted to write this book is just because it has been like such a huge thing for me in such a like weird way. With just making me feel like better about, my life and myself and all that kind of stuff, you know?
We've done more than 1,000 episodes of this show, and a great number of those authors that have been on have been crime writers or thriller writers or, someone that depicts heinous acts on the page. And one thing that just always just tickles me is the fact that these are some of the nicest, most genuine people that you'll ever meet in your life, but they can write some of the most horrific stuff on the page. And I've often wondered, like, why is this the case? And as someone who's actually been through trauma and then wrote a story like this, I think I'm making more of that connection now. Like it really is something about the camaraderie, about knowing someone else has been there and that you're not alone.
Yeah, and I think that part of it too is writers are very empathetic. So whereas some people can hear about horrible things or happening in the world and kind of maybe just look the other way, we really like connect, to like the emotional element, and we don't ignore stuff. Like we actually try to write about obviously stuff that's happening, stuff that's important, and this is like obviously like death is like the biggest thing that happens to us all, and everyone kind of wants to pretend like it doesn't happen. And I think that authors are honest and empathetic people. So yeah, I think it is interesting because it is like I would say, like when I would go to those events, they would be like the most kind, friendly people. And I think the reason that they connect with it is because they are so empathetic. I mean, you look at people like Michelle McNamara, who's like, obviously like a hero of like the true crime world, and the amount of her life that she was willing to sacrifice for other people. I mean, there's a really very heroic and amazing people in that community,
So, Eliza, when you started thinking about this book, I love to hear stories of the beginnings of things, how a story takes life, how it, goes from you're one moment thinking about nothing or just random daily things. And all of a sudden, either a character walks on the stage of your mind, or maybe you read a news article, or maybe you listen to a true crime podcast and start thinking, what was the genesis moment for this book?
Well, so this one kind of came around gradually. And the very first thing that actually, I guess, was like the first piece was the setting. And that was because I had been living in England for like 10 years. After my husband died, I came back to America. And I took a job working at a dude ranch in rural Northern California. And I go to this place and I'm kind of, I go to this place kind of thinking I just thought I was going to be like this. I used to ride horses. I was like, I'm going to have this like magical summer, like out in the woods, like just like working with horses, like it'll be really therapeutic. I get to this place and like pretty immediately I was like, oh, this is not like what I thought it was going to be. Like it looked a lot different. The people I met were not what I expected. And it became like this situation. I got there in the preseason, so really nobody was around. The ranch hadn't opened yet. And there were people kind of out in that area who had been there for a long time and who kind of lived out there for a reason, because they didn't really necessarily like other people, maybe. And it was just like this crazy, like psychological experiment because like people would like tell scary stories. People would be kind of, I don't know, controlling. It was just really wild. So I only lasted there for like 6 weeks before it literally got dangerous. And I was like, I need to actually get out of here. This is crazy. So I left, but I was like, dude, that's a good setting for a story. So it kind of started from there. And then it was like, at first it was like a way different like story that I was looking at. Like I was like looking at doing a story about like, like a liberal who went into like the super Republican town and just like got, I don't know, like this sort of horror of that. And then I kind of discovered the true crime element. And so I put that in. And then I like, I think that what really unlocked it for me was like, Carolyn Kepnes's book, You, where she
Yeah.
uses the second person. And like, I read that and that was like, made me realize, oh, I could make this work if I do it like that. Because the problem, I guess, for like my story is that you have a character, Sarah, who connects to this person, Rachel, but we never really see Rachel. So it was like, how can I actually get her on the page? And once I read that book and kind of realized that like I could do, use that second person, I was like, oh, now it just works. And so then I was able to write it, from there.
Dream Author by Sophie Hannah is an immersive 14-month coaching program for writers at any and every level of experience, and also for those of you who want to write and are just waiting for the right encouragement and guidance to get you started. Your writing dreams should make you happy. For so many of us, our dreams are not a source of happiness. Instead, they cause us stress, guilt, frustration, and even shame. Here's the great news. All of these feelings are natural and all writers experience them. The problem, though, is that when your writing dreams bring you more anxiety than joy, it affects your resolve and your productivity, and you end up not taking the action you need to take in order to propel your dreams in the right direction so that they can stand a strong chance of coming true. That's why Sophie created the Dream Author Coaching Program, to teach anyone who is passionate about writing how to change the way they build, think about, and pursue their writing dreams in order to become their own most powerful ally and advocate for the rest of their writing life. And more great news. Once you've learned that skill, it lasts forever. Visit dreamauthorcoaching.com to get started today.
So second person is a difficult thing to pull off. It's not it's not the way a lot of people think. When they start typing. What were some of the challenges of using that as kind of a springboard?
Honestly, I think I have like for this book, I think that it just like fit so well with what I needed to do that I wouldn't say it was like, it didn't feel difficult. You know what I mean? Like it felt like this is how it should be. It was hard. The book was hard to write when I was trying to write it in first person. And I think that once I kind of got that, I guess that tense, but not only that, but I think there's a level of like the obsession that that the main character has in You as well. It really like just kind of, I felt like it really flowed from there. And I think that it helped that I didn't really think about it as, oh, I'm writing in second person. Like, I think that sometimes you can psych yourself out when you're like, oh, I'm writing in present tense. Oh, I'm writing in, I don't know, right? If you're trying to force it into a tense that maybe doesn't work.
Right.
But I think that because it kind of suited the story, that was actually probably one of like the easier parts, like the mystery part and all that kind of stuff is kind of tricky, but.
That's fun. So tell me about the character of Sarah. Where did she come from?
I would say like, I have like anxiety. So part of her character, I think, is like just like processing like own like anxiety in a way, because like when you have like anxiety attacks, like you kind of don't know like what's real and what's not, or you don't know if like you feel like you have a sense that something's going to happen or something bad has happened, but like you don't know if you can trust yourself. Right. So I definitely like used that aspect of like my personality, and just tried to really magnify it. And then I also think that I tried to like put in here like her, like all the stuff that I would say that I'm like afraid of being like as a woman. Like I think that like, I'm scared of people thinking I'm weird or crazy. I'm scared of being vulnerable. So I kind of put all those things like into that character, just as a way to like kind of look at it and address it. Actually, it was like really therapeutic too. I think it kind of like helped me to like get some stuff out of my head that was kind of like maybe silly. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So what was the most fun part about this book to write?
I probably like really liked writing. The podcast episodes were fun because I like took from like real notorious true crimes. So that was just like fun because you could just kind of like think of like the wildest sort of story or like some kind of just a creepy image. You didn't have to really like spend all this time kind of like developing it and make sure it made sense. You could just kind of like throw it in there like and play with it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's kind of the one of the fun things about writing crime is it doesn't necessarily have to follow rules.
Yeah.
We read crazy stories every day of real life things that happen. Mm-hmm. The possibilities are limitless, really.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is always stranger than fiction, too. So
right. Exactly. The book really deals with obsession in an interesting way. When you started writing the book and really got into the story, and Sarah's obsession with the podcast, and then finding out what's happened. I'm trying not to give away too much of the story as I kind of shape this question.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself immersing into the story? Like a lot of times we'll listen to a true crime podcast or watch a documentary series, and by 3 or 4 episodes in, we're like all in. Was it like that when writing her? Did you start kind of connecting with Sarah as you wrote her?
I mean, yeah, like I think I'm a very obsessive person in a way. Like especially like when it comes to like writing, like if I'm drafting something, like I have to like work on it every day, and like I try to like hit certain things, and I do definitely get like immersed in that world where like the coolest times is when you feel really tapped into it and the story is just like flowing through you. You know what I mean? So I definitely tried to like get really immersed into the world and just allow myself to do that, which can sometimes, when you're writing thrillers, can sometimes like not always be like a happy face. Like for this
or
book,
healthy.
like I mean, like it was like a lot. Like I mean, I guess in a way, it was like a long time ago that I wrote it. It was probably like 2 years ago, so I don't remember it too well, but I definitely remember like crying a lot. Like, and just being like, this is really hard, but like also because it's like emotional. I don't know. But yeah, like I definitely like was able to tap into that because I'm someone who like, I think a lot of writers have to be, you like fixate on stuff. Like you can get lost in a book for a whole day. That takes like a certain amount of like I think an obsessive quality, or to bowl through like a whole book. I mean, to finish a book, you have to have some level of that. So I think, yeah, it was just kind of like an aspect of myself, in a way.
Right. So one of the biggest arguments or divides in the writer community is this idea that people are either pantsers or plotters. You either write by the seat of your pants, or you know what the story is before you start writing it, and you kind of filling in the details as you go. Do you consider yourself in one of those camps?
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like I like oscillate because like I want to be like a plotter, but honestly, like what happens whenever I plot something is it kind of seems like it sort of like robs the emotion from the story. Like I'm just kind of doing like paint by numbers, and there's no sort of spontaneity. So, I try to kind of run like an amalgam, like I try to have an idea, but I think that for me, especially writing thrillers, you want to be able to surprise the reader. And if I have to feel surprised too, like I'm a very, I guess, like in a way, a very like genuine person. And I have trouble. Like if I know the ending of something, I might not be able to hide that. So like with this book, for example, like I actually rewrote the second half of the book like 3 times with different villains at the end. And then when I landed on the one that is in the book, I was like, oh, that actually finally that works. But I think if I had known it from the beginning, it probably would have been really obvious to everybody.
I love that idea of not knowing it because you want it to be just as much a surprise to you as the reader because you'll give it away.
Well, and then I want to be honest to them too. Like I don't like to trick people. Like I'm like, I'll tell you guys, like this is, just heads up, get ready. Okay.
Right. So when you started on this book, we know that you brought a pandemic on, and so what are you planning for your follow up? I mean,
my follow up, here we go. Well, so I have a 2-book deal. My follow up is a lot different because I feel like right now, like for me, I wanted something that was like a thriller but a little bit lighter. So it's almost like a comedic thriller. And the title of it, like I won't, I guess, go into what it is, but the title of it is Good Rich People. And my tagline is, my personal tagline is, there aren't any. So like, it's like a more like crazy, but it's also like talking about stuff that I feel is very important. So yeah.
So the If I Disappear is technically your sophomore book, even though it's your first adult book. Starting on your 3rd book now, is the process easier? Do you feel like that you've crossed a hurdle, so to speak?
Oh no, No, it's terrible. This year, like writing a book, oh my gosh, it was bad. Like this one had way more tears. So like I spent the entire year trying to write to an outline. This is like kind of what we talked about with outlines. And it was not working. And it was like, I was just like so stressed. I was like crying all the time. Like, this sucks. It's terrible. And then finally it was getting towards the end. And I was like, dude, I have to redo this whole thing. Like, I need to fix this. Like, I need to start over and stop trying to like, because sometimes when you're revising, you try to keep stuff that you like. And I was like, no, I can't do that anymore. I need to start from page 1. So I, reached out to my editor and was like, look, I don't feel happy with, I guess, what I'm doing. So I want to change it to this. Like, I sent her the pitch, kind of like scrawled together like a sort of outline. And she was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And then I spent like 5 weeks rewriting the entire book, and like got super lucky in that I think it made sense. And she really liked it. I've sent it already out to like an author for a blurb, and she loved it. So it worked out in the end, but I will say that it was not easy. Oh, I have another one I think coming through now. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So Eliza, the book, we're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode. Tell people where they can find you online if they want to connect with all that you do.
Yeah, I'm on all the major ones. So Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And yeah, feel free to, follow me on Twitter. I'll give you a follow back and reach out anytime.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Eliza. Have a great day.